Welcome to Karen Stories, where the wildest Karen encounters unfold. Get ready for hilarious, unbelievable, and shocking moments as Karens make the most outrageous demands. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to never miss a crazy story. Let's dive in. I smelled smoke before I saw the flames. At first, I thought it was just another one of the HOA's petty tricks. Maybe they had set a small fire in my yard as a warning. A little scare tactic to remind me who was in charge. Wouldn't have been the first time they tried something underhanded. My mailbox had mysteriously disappeared 2 weeks ago. My water had been shut off for non-payment despite me paying the city directly. And last month someone had reported me to the county for having an unapproved fence. That one had been particularly amusing since I didn't even have a fence. But this was different. By the time I stepped outside, the fire had already taken hold. My home, the one place where I was supposed to be safe from the insipid tyranny of an overreaching HOA, was being devoured by the flames. Thick black smoke coiled into the sky, choking the air, stinging my eyes. The heat hit me like a wall, a blistering wave that sent my heart hammering in my chest. The fire department was on its way, sirens wailing in the distance, but I already knew. It was too late. And standing at the edge of my driveway, watching my home burn with an expression that could only be described as self-satisfied smugness, was none other than Karen Whitmore, president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA. "Oh dear," she said, voice thick with mock sympathy, one manicured hand resting delicately over her chest. "What an absolute tragedy." I turned to face her, my fists clenched at my sides. "What the hell did you do?" she gasped, all wide eyes and theatrical offense. "Me? Oh no, Mr. Gray, I would never do something so unethical." My vision blurred not from the smoke, but from sheer, incandescent rage. I had seen this woman pull some ridiculous power plays before. The way she wielded her little title as if she were the queen of the neighborhood, lording over anyone who dared challenge her arbitrary, nonsensical rules. But this was beyond petty fines and fake violations. This was destruction. Arson. A crime. And she was smiling. "You should have joined, you know," she continued, tilting her head in that condescending way she always did. "We could have avoided all of this. But no, you just to be difficult. The HOA exists for a reason, Mr. Gray. It's about maintaining order, maintaining standards." I stared at her, barely believing what I was hearing. "You think burning my house down is maintaining standards?" Her lips curled into a saccharine smile. "Don't be dramatic. Maybe if you'd paid your dues, this wouldn't have happened." I wanted to lunge at her. I wanted to shake her, scream in her face, make her understand what she'd just done. My house, my life, my belongings, my memories, all of it turned to ash because I refused to bow to her absurd little dictatorship. A crackling boom echoed through the night as part of the roof collapsed, sending a fresh spray of embers into the air. The heat intensified, sweat dripping down my temples as I took an involuntary step back. Firefighters were now racing onto the scene, shouting orders, hoses blasting water onto what was left of my home. Karen barely even glanced at them. Instead, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse and thrust it toward me. "For your reference," she said sweetly, "this is your final warning. If you decide to rebuild, you will need HOA approval for any new construction. And, of course, you'll be required to pay all outstanding fees before any permits can be issued." I couldn't breathe. The audacity, the sheer, unbelievable gall of this woman. My house was still burning. My house was still burning. And she was standing here, in the glow of the fire, holding out a goddamn violation notice. I took the paper from her, staring at it like it might combust in my hands. "Karen," I said, voice dangerously low, "you have no idea who you just fucked with." She let out a patronizing chuckle, as if I were nothing more than a disobedient child throwing a tantrum. "Oh, Mr. Gray, you act as if you have some kind of power here. But let's be real, you're just another homeowner. Just another name on my list." That was her mistake. I stepped closer, so close she had to tilt her head to keep eye contact. The amusement in her eyes flickered, just for a moment. "I was willing to ignore the fines," I said. "I was willing to put up with the harassment, the citations, even the fake complaints. I figured it wasn't worth my time." I let the paper slip from my fingers, watching as it fluttered to the ground between us. "But this?" I gestured to the burning wreckage behind me, to the destruction she had so gleefully orchestrated. "This was your biggest mistake." She scoffed. "Oh please. What are you going to do? File a complaint?" I smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "No, Karen," I said softly, "I'm going to destroy you." 3 months earlier, I thought I had finally found peace. After years of dealing with the suffocating weight of the legal system, of hearing the worst of humanity spill out in my courtroom. I had been ready for a quiet life. A house on the edge of town, away from the noise, away from the chaos. Somewhere I could sit on my porch with a strong coffee and a stronger bourbon, watching the sun dip below the horizon without wondering what fresh new case of absolute idiocy would land on my desk the next morning. I had chosen Oak Ridge Estates because it seemed, at a glance, like that kind of place. Quiet. Manicured. Respectable. What I hadn't realized was that I had walked straight into the heart of a suburban dictatorship. The first warning sign came in the form of a glossy, pastel-colored letter, placed neatly in my mailbox, before I had even finished unpacking. Welcome to the community. The exclamation mark should have been my first red flag. The second red flag was the fine print beneath it. As a resident of Oak Ridge Estates, you are required to enroll in the Homeowners Association. Please find attached the necessary paperwork to submit your first annual fee of $2,500. I remember staring at it, blinking slowly, reading the number over and over again as if, maybe, just maybe, my exhaustion from moving had made me hallucinate. $2,500? A year? For what? I set the letter aside, deciding to deal with it later. Big mistake. Karen Whitmore, HOA president, was at my door the next morning, bright and early, wearing a pastel pink blazer that matched the nauseating shade of the letter. She smiled in a way that reminded me of a predator, baring its teeth, before a kill. Good morning, Mr. Gray. I wanted to personally welcome you to our lovely community. I should have shut the door right then. Instead, I made the mistake of being polite. Morning, I replied, still groggy. Thanks. Just getting settled in. I see that. She craned her neck, eyes scanning my unpacked boxes, like she was evaluating whether they met some unwritten standard. Then she produced a clipboard and a pen. I noticed you haven't turned in your HOA paperwork yet. I'd be happy to walk you through it. I frowned, my exhaustion quickly being replaced by irritation. Yeah, I read over that. I'm not really interested in joining an HOA. A pause, a flicker of something in her eyes. Then another blinding, saccharine smile. Oh, Mr. Gray, she said with a small, patronizing laugh, as if I had just told her I didn't believe in gravity. It's not optional. I arched a brow. Pretty sure it is. Another pause. A twitch in the corner of her eye. I don't think you understand. Everyone in Oak Ridge Estates is part of the HOA. It's what keeps our community orderly. Orderly, I echoed, crossing my arms. Karen, I bought this house. It's my property. I don't recall signing any agreement that said I had to join your little club. That was the first time I saw it. The shift. The way her face hardened ever so slightly. The way her fingers tightened around her clipboard. The way her eyes went from fake friendly to cold calculation. She exhaled sharply through her nose, like she was still trying to keep up the act. Well, Mr. Gray, she said, voice just a touch cooler, I'll give you some time to reconsider. We wouldn't want things to get difficult. That word hung in the air between us, a veiled threat wrapped in a sickly sweet bow. I should have known right then that Karen Whitmore wasn't the kind of person who took no for an answer. The retaliation started small, annoying, but manageable. First, it was the garbage pickup. Somehow, mine was accidentally skipped 3 weeks in a row, leaving my bins overflowing. When I called the waste management company, they informed me they'd received a complaint from the HOA about my unsorted trash. Then, the citations started showing up in my mailbox. Lawn not up to HOA standards. Unapproved exterior paint color. Failure to submit landscaping plans for review. I hadn't done anything. I'd barely had time to breathe between unpacking and figuring out how to enjoy retirement. But according to Karen and her merry band of power-drunk suburban enforcers, I was already a repeat offender. The neighbors, for the most part, kept their heads down. Some gave me sympathetic looks. Others avoided eye contact entirely. One older gentleman down the street, Mr. Carter, gave me a knowing nod one evening, as I collected yet another citation from my mailbox. Stand your ground, he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. That woman's a damn menace. That was the day I started to take things personally. I stopped ignoring the letters. I started pushing back. I sent formal complaints to the city about harassment. I got a lawyer to look over my property deed to confirm, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was not legally bound to the HOA. I even filed a restraining order against Karen, after she was caught on my security camera standing in my driveway at 2 a.m, just staring at my house. Then, last week, I came home to find my mailbox missing. Gone. Ripped out of the ground. In its place was a note from the HOA. Mailboxes must conform to neighborhood standards. Yours was not approved. Please install an HOA-approved box within 7 days to avoid penalties. I laughed when I read it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd, so cartoonishly villainous, that I almost couldn't believe it was real. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was trying to break me. And then, tonight, as I stood in my driveway watching the flames consume everything I owned, I realized something. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally beaten me into submission. But what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that she had just made the worst mistake of her life. She had declared war on the wrong man. I don't think Karen realized how badly she had screwed up until the police arrived. Or maybe she did, but she was too damn arrogant to believe there would be consequences. Either way, watching her face shift from smug satisfaction to barely concealed irritation when the flashing blue and red lights filled the cul-de-sac was almost worth the fact that my house had been reduced to a pile of smoldering rubble. Almost. Officer Reynolds, a man I had seen once or twice around town, but never had reason to interact with, stepped out of his squad car and walked toward me. His gaze flickered between me and the ruins of my home, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Mr. Gray," he said, nodding. "We got the call about the fire. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, voice even despite the fury burning in my gut. I turned my head just enough to gesture toward Karen, who was standing a few feet away, arms crossed like she was the one being inconvenienced. "But I'd like to formally report an arson." Karen scoffed so loudly that Reynolds actually blinked. "Arson," she repeated, her voice dripping with faux innocence. "Oh, please. That's quite an accusation, Mr. Gray." I took a step forward, closing the space between us, my eyes locked onto hers. "You think I don't know what you did?" I said, voice low. "You think I don't have cameras? Records? Witnesses?" For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw it. Doubt it was brief. A flicker of hesitation that she quickly buried beneath layers of condescension. But it was there. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said smoothly, flipping her blonde bob over one shoulder. "And unless you have actual proof, I suggest you be very careful with your accusations." "Oh, don't worry," I said, smiling coldly. "I have proof. Lots of it." And then, as if the universe had decided to reward me for my patience, Gregory Carter stepped forward. Gregory was my neighbor, a retired veteran who had lived in Oak Ridge Estates for over 20 years. The man had always kept his head down, staying out of HOA politics. But he had seen what they had been doing to me. He had warned me about Karen. And now, as he limped forward, leaning on his cane, I knew exactly why he had stayed silent for so long. Because he had been gathering information. "I saw them," Gregory said, his voice steady. "Saw them outside your house an hour before the fire started. Karen, her little minions. They were messing with your gas line." Karen's face paled so fast I thought she might pass out. "That's ridiculous," she snapped, shaking her head. "Gregory, you're confused." "No," he said firmly, "I'm not." My jaw clenched as I turned to Reynolds. "That enough proof for you?" The officer exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, I think you need to come down to the station for questioning." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "This is absurd," she finally hissed, eyes darting around, searching for support. But none of her usual lackeys stepped in. They just stood there, silent, watching their queen unravel. And then she made her next mistake. She turned to me. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she snarled. All pretense of politeness gone. "Do you think this will stop me? You think I'll just go away? I have connections. Friends in high places. You're a washed-up old judge with no authority anymore. I run this neighborhood. I have owned this neighborhood." I chuckled. It was low, dark, devoid of humor. "Oh, Karen," I said, shaking my head. "You really should have done your homework." She frowned, hesitating. I took another step closer, dropping my voice so only she could hear me. "I wasn't just any judge," I murmured. "I was a federal judge. I've put away people a hell of a lot more powerful than you." I let that sink in, let her mind catch up to the reality of the situation. "And now, you're on my docket." For the first time, real fear flashed across her face. Reynolds must have seen it too, because he stepped forward and placed a firm hand on her arm. "Ma'am," he said, "you need to come with me, now." Karen yanked her arm free, wild-eyed. "This isn't over," she hissed at me, her breath ragged. "You'll regret this." "No," I said calmly, watching as she was escorted toward the police car. "I think the only one who's going to regret anything is you." As the squad car door slammed shut behind her, I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. It wasn't over, not yet. But Karen had made the fatal mistake of underestimating the wrong man. And now, She was about to learn exactly what happens when you push someone who knows the system better than you do. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. Karen's kingdom was crumbling, and I made damn sure I was there to watch it fall. Her arrest was only the beginning. The morning after she was dragged off in handcuffs, news of her detainment spread like wildfire through Oak Ridge Estates. It started as whispers, uncertain, hesitant, until the full story began unraveling, piece by damning piece. It turned out that Karen had been running the HOA like her own personal fiefdom for years, using intimidation, manipulation, and outright fraud to control the neighborhood. Homeowners had been illegally fined, coerced into mandatory donations, and threatened with foreclosure if they so much as dared to question her authority. And, as it turned out, I wasn't the only one who had been targeted. The difference? I fought back, and now, everyone else was following my lead. By the end of the week, the city's legal department had launched a full-scale investigation. The HOA's finances were dragged into the daylight, and, unsurprisingly, thousands of dollars in unaccounted fees and misappropriated funds were discovered. Karen had been skimming money from homeowners under the guise of beautification projects that never actually happened. Some of that money, it seemed, had gone toward luxury vacations, high-end shopping sprees, and even an offshore account. Oh, and the best part? The HOA lawyer she had always threatened people with? A fake. The HOA's so-called legal team was nothing more than a friend of hers from yoga class, who had zero credentials, and had been operating under the assumption that no one would ever check. Well, guess what? I checked. The scandal erupted beyond the neighborhood, making local and state news. Reporters were camped outside Karen's pristine McMansion, eager to shove microphones into the faces of anyone who had an opinion on the downfall of Oak Ridge Estate's self-proclaimed queen. The footage of her sneering at the camera as she was taken into custody replayed on a loop. But Karen? She still refused to go down quietly. From jail, she tried to play the victim. "This is a witch hunt," she shrieked in an interview with a sympathetic local reporter. "This is all because one difficult homeowner refused to follow the rules. I did nothing wrong." Oh, Karen, you did everything wrong. And justice was only getting started. The homeowners, the people she had bullied, harassed, and stolen from for years, began filing lawsuits. Civil suits, class action claims, the works. Karen wasn't just facing criminal charges, she was facing financial ruin. By the time the full weight of her actions hit her, it was too late. The HOA board disbanded, the neighborhood declared its independence, and Karen, once untouchable in her little throne of pastel tyranny, was publicly humiliated in every possible way. And then came my personal favorite part: the seizure of assets. See, when the financial fraud charges started piling up, the court ordered an asset forfeiture. Her house, her car, her ridiculous designer wardrobe, all of it was frozen. And when it became clear that she had no way to pay back the hundreds of thousands she had stolen, they took everything, including her precious house in Oak Ridge Estates. I made sure to attend the auction. There she was, standing off to the side, watching as strangers bid on the very home she once used as a symbol of her power. The look on her face when the winning bidder turned out to be me? Absolutely priceless. "You can't do this," she spat, her voice venomous. "You can't live here." "Oh, I won't," I told her, pocketing the deed with a smile. "I'm donating it. Low-income housing initiative. Should be a nice change of pace for the neighborhood." I thought she might actually implode on the spot. With nothing left, no house, no power, no one to bully, Karen disappeared. Last I heard, she had moved into a tiny rental outside of town, far from the community she once ruled with an iron fist. No more HOA meetings. No more fraudulent fines. No more harassment. Just irrelevance. And me. I rebuilt. Bigger. Better. Stronger. Because in the end, Karen learned the most important lesson of all. Some people you just don't mess with.